Welcome to Referencing and Plagiarism, brought to you by Central Queensland University. My name is Julia Doyle and I work on the Sydney campus, and today I'd like to show you how to reference and, in doing so, how to avoid plagiarism. So let's begin. Today the information will be divided into three areas. The first is why you need to reference. The second is where you reference within your writing. And finally, how to do so using CQUniversity's own version of Harvard referencing, which is available online. The information will also be divided into separate chapters that you'll be able to go back to later to revise or remind you of any of the things we deal with today. So let's look at the reasons why you need to reference. The first reason you need to reference is to support your argument. You need to back up the things you say with the research that you've done. The second reason you need to reference is to acknowledge that there has been other academic research done in this field and to show that you're aware of that. You've done your research and you found out about all those theories and all these authors. Thirdly, you want to give your own argument credibility. So the things that you are writing can be proven. And how can they be proven? Well, they're proven by referring to other research and other studies and other theories. The fourth reason to reference is to avoid plagiarism. As you know, it's not allowed at university to simply cut and paste from other sources. You are required at university as a student to do your own research and to integrate that research into your essay with your opinion. And this is how you can maintain your integrity as a writer. If you didn't know something before you started writing, then how did you know that? How did you learn that? Where did you get that information from? You'll show that by referencing. The next reason to reference is so that your reader can locate the information that you've used. So if you've used a website, your reader will be able to find that exact web page with those exact figures and dates. If you've used a journal article, your reader will be able to find it very quickly and easily because they'll know which journal to go to and which volume and which number. So it can help your reader to find information that they might find really relevant and interesting. And a final incentive to reference is to fulfill your assignment criteria. In most assignments you get marks for referencing because it does show your research and your academic integrity. So generally about 10% of your marks you'll get from correctly referencing. Hopefully you'll be able to do so having watched this. Okay, so let's move on to where you need to reference. And you need to reference in two places, and we can consider this the long and the short of referencing. Well, the short and the long. So the first place, the short of referencing, is in text. So this is throughout your paragraphs. Nearly every paragraph will need a reference because you will be substantiating the things you're saying and proving them by referring to the work of other authors and other academics. This is the short version of referencing. Why is it short? Because not much information is needed here, and we'll show you which information is needed in just a minute. The long version of referencing comes at the end of your paper by way of your reference list. And this is the long of referencing because it has every single detail: the name, the year, the date, the volume, the city, every piece of information you have about that source that you've used. Also, we'll show an example of this. But let's start with the short of referencing. So firstly, paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is a very short version of referencing. Paraphrasing is when you use the ideas of another writer and you put those ideas into your words. So someone else's ideas in your words, and how do you refer to that in text? Let's have a look at that. So in text, in my essay, I'd like to refer to the ideas of brick. And we know in text, it's the short version. We only need two things. We need name and year. That's all you need. So this is in-text referencing. in the middle of your paragraph after the idea of someone else, which you've put into your words. You haven't copied those exact words, instead you've paraphrased. So there are 3 different ways of doing this. Firstly, and example 1, we have an idea followed by the author's name and year. So as you know, name and year. Brick 2006 comes in parentheses after the idea, in brackets, and the full stop comes after the brackets. That's important to note. In the second example, we have according to Brick. So we now have the author's name in the sentence. So in the bracket, all we need is the year. So according to Brick, in brackets, 2006, a comma, and then that idea of bricks. The third has a reporting verb. Argue, states, claims, suggests, says. So we have Brick's name in the sentence, in brackets only the year, and then the reporting verb, and finally the idea. So 3 different ways of using someone else's idea and putting that idea into your words, paraphrasing. Let's deal now with direct quotes. Direct quotes are when you use the ideas of someone and also their exact words, the exact words that they said. So if you're using the exact words of someone, you do the same as when you are paraphrasing, but you add quotation marks because you are quoting or giving those exact words, and you also add a comma and a page number. So let's have a look. So again, we have 3 different ways of showing Brick's idea and Brick's exact words. In the first example, we have the idea in the exact words that Brick said them in within that journal article or website. And in brackets, I have name, year, and page. So we have surname and then year, comma, and page. Page is indicated by a P dot and then the page number. Generally, the page number is only 1 number because your quotes are usually quite short, so they won't go over many pages. So we have the first example with just the idea and then name, year, comma, page. The second example, we have according to Brick, so we have the author's name in the sentence. So then in parentheses, we have year, comma, page, indicated by P dot and then the number of the page, and close parentheses, a comma, and now we have those exact words that Brick said. The third example, we have a reporting verb again. Brick, his name is in the sentence, we have the year and the page in parentheses with the comma, and now we have argue, states, claims, suggests, defines, and then we have those exact words and the exact idea of Brick. So let's look at the exact words of someone else, someone that you may know. Who is this person? Well, that's a good question. Last time I asked students who this person was, who said this very famous quote, these famous words. They told me that it was Justin Bieber. It wasn't Justin Bieber. I know this cartoon possibly doesn't look that familiar to you, but I can tell you that a famous person in our recent history said these famous words, yes, we can. Very powerful words, and let's look at how we can use those exact words within your writing. Who said them? Well, it wasn't Justin Bieber. It was Barack Obama, and he said those in accepting his election win. So let's use Barack Obama's exact words now in this sentence. So perhaps my essay is about America and American optimism. These are very optimistic words, Barack said. So I'm going to start my sentence with, in America, a new optimism was shown. And now, using what you've just seen, try to add Barack Obama's words following this first part of the sentence. Don't forget we need name, year, and page. So pause here. You may not know the page, I haven't given you that, but pause here and see how you could complete this sentence. Okay, so here we go. Here is the correct referencing of those exact words, powerful words from Barack Obama. In America, a new optimism was shown in Obama's election speech when he said, "Yes, we can." Exact words, quotation mark, and then in brackets we have the year and the page. Of course, we don't have Barack's name in the bracket because we already have his name in the sentence. So simply name in the sentence, and here we have year and page number. So that's my direct quote. So why is there no name in the bracket? Of course, the name is in the sentence. But we could do it another way. We could have, in America, a new optimism was shown recently when in an election speech, America heard the words, "Yes, we can." In that case, I would have name, year, and page, and therefore Barack's name would be in the parentheses. And we have another example here of those words, but here we have a paraphrase. I haven't used the exact words of Barack Obama. I've changed his exact words. So again, we don't need a page number here. We need simply name and year. You can see the name in the sentence, and therefore in the brackets at the end, just a year. In America, a new optimism was shown in Obama's election speech when he said that Americans could do it, and therefore just a year. I've changed those exact words here. Okay, direct words should not be used very often. They should be used sparingly, perhaps once or twice only in your paper. So Barack Obama's very powerful words are a great example of when you would use a direct quote, when you have very powerful words, powerful statements, and sometimes you might need them for definitions. So definitions and powerful statements, especially emotional statements, are when you will use the exact words. A lot of the time in your academic writing, you will be summarizing ideas from a whole chapter or a whole book or a whole journal article or results from a whole paper. Of course, you can't have a direct quote that is that long, the length of a whole paper. So most of the time you'll be paraphrasing, but occasionally you may need a direct quote. Reference lists. Every paper, whether it's a report or an essay, and often even in your oral presentations, at the end, you'll provide a reference list. So this is the long version of referencing where you give every single detail, name, year, volume, city, everything. Okay, so about reference lists. Reference lists should start on a new page with a title at the top, References. Your references should be in alphabetical order by surname of writers. You don't need to use bullet points or numbers between each reference. However, you should leave a clear space, double space perhaps, between each reference so it's clear where one source starts and ends and the next one starts and ends. Pay close attention to punctuation and especially formatting. Referencing is all about formatting. It's all about detail. Where does the comma go? Where does the full stop go? It needs to be precise. It is a formula, and we'll show you that formula for the reference list in just a minute. Now, every reference looks different in your reference list depending on whether it's a book or a journal article or a website. So there's no need to tell your reader which was a website, which was a book. It'll be really clear by the way you've referenced it. Now there is available online a very long comprehensive referencing guide which deals with every single possible source you may use, including things like maps or plans or annual reports or tweets or Facebooks or blogs, things like that. So please refer to that if you need to use more obscure sources, but now we'll take you through some common sources. Firstly, referencing books. How do you need to reference books? Generally, you will start with your writing and research from your textbook. So it's quite common that you'll want to reference a book, and in particular, your textbook. So here's an example of how you might refer to a book. And you'll remember BRIC's name was mentioned earlier. So we showed you some in-text referencing using BRIC. So now we need to give BRIC in our reference list. And how do we give a book in the reference list? Well, this is a book with one author, so we have that author's surname, so Brick, then we have a comma, then initial and year are together in the next comma. This is unusual about Harvard, that an initial and a year should be together, but that's how it is. Initial and year, comma, the title, which you see is in italics, and next we have the publisher, and finally the city. The publisher and the city, and often the year, all that information can be found near the copyright symbol on your book. So if you're not sure who's the printer and who's the publisher, have a look at the copyright symbol, and most of that information will be just after it. So that's how you deal with a book with one author. But what about a book with more than one author? Commonly your textbooks have more than one author. So here's an example of how you will have a textbook in your reference list at the end of your paper. So we have surname, comma, then the initials. In this case there are two, comma, surname, comma, initial, comma, surname, comma, initial, and the final surname, comma. Again, we have the initial and year together. The title of the book is in italics. With textbooks, we often have an edition. So after the title, we have the edition, 6th or 2ND, sixth edition, EDN, comma. Then we have the publisher, and finally the place. You'll note here we have edition. It's very important to put this in there because the information in the 6th or 5th or 4th edition may vary. So be sure what you used in text is relevant to the edition. So that's how you'll deal with a book, often a textbook with many authors. You'll notice Kotler, Brown, Adam, these surnames themselves are not in alphabetical order. They're the order they appeared in on the book. Now you don't change the order of these names, because in books with more than one author, the author who did the most work comes first. So here we see Kotler did more work than Brown, who did more work than Adam. So we'll leave them in the order they're written on the book, with K being the first name. So this will appear in my reference list halfway down around the Ks. How do you reference websites? Here's an example of a website that was used for a particular essay. We can assume this was about banking and finance. So similar to the previous entry where we dealt with a book, we have the author. In this case, it's a corporate author, Commonwealth Bank, and the year, 2013. We have a comma. We have the title of the web page. So this was not obviously the home page at Commonwealth Bank. This was a page titled Our People. We have a comma. Then we have the date that it was viewed. In this case, it was viewed in January 2013. And next we have the full URL, which is cut and pasted onto your reference list so that it's exact. It doesn't matter if this is very, very long, because as we said previously, the point of having a reference list is to be able to find that exact source in the exact way. So if you just give combank.com.au, all I'll be able to find is the home page, which won't reveal the information that you sourced from the Our People page. So be very specific with your websites, especially the date you viewed it, because that information online changes often, and especially the URL. A few points about websites. Firstly, check the validity. We know .com commercial websites, they're generally trying to sell you something. It's not always information or research. It might be an ad for information. So be very certain and clear when you are using websites, and be very clear about the way you can and can't use that information. Commonwealth Bank may provide information about how many staff they have and how many branches they have. But for example, I wouldn't be able to find information about customer complaints or anything negative. So be careful about which websites you use and the kind of information you intend to obtain there. So that's what we mean by check the validity of a website and think about how you're going to use it. Many websites whoever hosts that website is considered the author because there is no author. But occasionally there may be an author, in which case it will be referenced slightly differently. Again, I'd refer you to the online referencing guide. It's slightly different to this. Occasionally you will find a website with no date, in which case you'll use n.d. small n small d. However, often the date, the last updated date, will be in the year that you're viewing it. Final pointer, please cut and paste the URL because we want the exact website. Don't forget, as a reader, I want to find that exact information. Referencing journal articles. How do we do that? That is the most commonly used source for academic research and writing. So let's have a look at how to reference a journal article. Here's a journal article by an author called Cavagnoli. I sourced this from a website, but this is the information I'll need in my reference list. I'll need surname, comma, initial and year together. Then I have the title, and you can see that the title is in quotation marks. After the title there's a comma, and the journal name is in italics. In this case the journal is called Innovation, Management Policy and Practice. Journals are often called Journal of or International Journal of, so this makes it quite easy to determine which is the journal name and which is the title of the essay or paper that appears in that particular journal. Now, journals are published regularly. In this case, we looked at volume 13, so we have VOL.13, NO number 1, and the pages that this essay appeared on were 111 to 125. So it's very important, volume, VOL dot, the volume and the number. There's nearly always both. Occasionally you may not have a number if it's an annual journal, but whatever information's there should appear. So obviously if there's no number, you don't need to create one or call it number 1, just give the volume. Plagiarism, or more specifically, how not to plagiarize. Plagiarism is a very serious academic misdemeanor, so let's look at plagiarism. And specifically, let's look at how to avoid it, because if you can reference correctly, you will avoid it, and that's what all academics aim to do. So, always reference when you use someone else's ideas, someone else's opinion, someone else's theory. You know when you sat down to start typing your essay, the information you already knew in your mind and that information you needed to look up and learn about. So anyone else's ideas or opinions or theories you need to reference. Anyone else's exact words you also need to reference, and of course their written words, so the ideas they've written down in a paper. When you use the exact words of someone else, you need to reference as well. When you use facts, statistics, drawings, graphs, charts, numbers, you must also reference those, and that really gives your writing credibility. Because, for example, imagine you put in your essay the population of Australia, and you found out the information in 2012, and someone reads your paper 3 years later. Of course, the population will have gone up, but your reference there is some kind of insurance for you. You found out that information, it was true in this year. And that's essential for facts and statistics. The things you don't need to reference are things that are known by everyone. So for example, like something like computers are used more and more in the workplace, or computers are used for a range of activities. Everyone would agree with that. We can call that a given. It does not need a reference. But something like there are 2.7 computers in each room of each household in Australia, I'd want to know who did that research and when. So you could support that kind of fact or statistic by giving a reference. So these are ways we can avoid plagiarizing. Another way to assist you in avoiding plagiarism, and especially to assist your marker or reader, is quite exceptional software that's available now called Turnitin. And while this software is exceptional, it is not as exceptional as your marker or reader, for the simple reason that if you have copied anything and not referenced, especially if you've copied it word for word, it'll be really clear in your writing when the style suddenly changes from very academic to very technical to very informal to very formal. That looks quite strange to a reader. So any reader can tell when writing style changes. However, this new software called Turnitin is able to show and prove that specifically. So Turnitin is able to compare your writing to every single document and piece of writing available on the World Wide Web and available through every database. So if you have copied something from a source, it will come up in a certain color that matches that source as given on a record on a document. So the point of Turnitin is it can compare your report, your essay, your paper to other students and to all information available on the web. So don't copy, instead reference correctly. Paraphrase well, don't change one word, instead use one word and write the rest in your words. Students shouldn't be worried about Turnitin, you should be your own Turnitin. You know what you wrote and you know how much of your writing is original ideas and how much of your writing was copied, if any, hopefully none. So you know what you wrote, don't copy because Turnitin can find that very easily. To conclude today's workshop about plagiarism and referencing, it's really important, as you mentioned many times, to reference, to acknowledge the research and ideas and writing of other academics. And why should you do this? Two reasons. I would say the most important one is to support your argument, and the secondary one is to avoid plagiarism. You need to reference even if you use your own words, because it's not your idea, it's not your theory, it's not your research. Even if you put that research into your words, still show where that research came from, or who had that theory, or who had that idea. Harvard referencing requires you to reference in two places, and as we said before, this is the long and short of referencing. In text is the short, which is name and year, and page number if it's a direct quote. At the end is your reference list containing every single detail, volume, year, number, as you saw before. If you quote, that means you use the direct, exact words of someone else. Single quotation marks are used in Harvard, not double. And page numbers are also used. Because we're talking about referencing, I'd like to show you my reference list, and this is perhaps what your reference list will look like, but hopefully longer. But these are the references I used to prepare the presentation today. As you know, I've referred to BRIC. So we have surname, comma, initial year, title in italics, publisher and place. Secondly, I can tell here that we have a journal article. I'm sure you know that because you saw it already, but the fact that we have in italics Innovation Management Policy and Practice, that's a journal title, and we have a volume and a number. The third reference, I'm sure you can guess, is our website. A very important website, CQUniversity's online referencing guide, and this has been referred to several times. This is a document that's 70 pages long. All of the information today has been sourced from there. All of your referencing questions are answered there. It has a full index of every single source imaginable, so please do keep that document on your desktop and please do refer to it. Finally, in the presentation today, we heard from Barack Obama, and this is how I would put Barack Obama in my reference list. Obama B, I have the year, I have the title, it was a speech, but you can see that I've sourced this speech online, and you can see the date it was sourced. Okay, now you're ready to attend a referencing workshop. So whichever campus you're nearer, you should ring or email or get in contact with, and in a workshop you'll be able to practice writing a reference list, practice paraphrasing, and practice how to do your direct quotes. There are a lot of online resources available to you. As I mentioned already, one of the most important ones is the online Harvard Referencing Guide. Please keep this page bookmarked and save this document. It's very important to you. If you would like to come on campus to see some tutors to practice or talk about referencing, please do ring or email your nearest campus. There are additional resources available online. In particular, there's the Academic Learning Center, which will look like this as a Moodle site. So please find this ALC site. You can go through these colored doors. The yellow door in particular, academic communication, has information about referencing and writing, such as essay writing and report writing. Thanks for your attention. Happy referencing. I love referencing. It's a science. It's all been recorded in the referencing guide, so you should be able to do everything correctly and get full marks for referencing. Thanks for watching. Bye.